And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for June 27th. Still a generally quiet picture across the tropics today. Boris has weakened to a depression as expected. It was the 31st storm to form around the world this year. We're now on day 179. So in the Atlantic, that 10% chance we've still got on our books here on day 27 of Atlantic hurricane season for a tropical wave that has a small chance of development as it crosses the Atlantic Ocean. In the Eastern Pacific, chances continue to dwindle for most of those 4 areas of interest. Only one of them's at moderate now at 40%, the others all at 10%. Day 44 over there. In the Western Pacific, no systems active again. Perhaps a little bit uncharacteristically, but in seasons like this it usually really gets going in July, if nothing else, so we'll wait and see on that one. And 2 areas of interest persist in the southern hemisphere, both at this point with a 20% chance of development. Looking rather interesting, the pair of them. So this is Boris right now. Unfortunately, for those who like tracking storms, it is the most exciting thing out there, and there's not much of it. 1,140 miles east-southeast of Hawaii, 12.4 north, 139.5 west, with winds of 35 miles per hour. And it's not expected to last much longer. Our map here might be a little bit generous, holding on for as a tropical depression for 3 days. Then it turns post-tropical, sinks back down to the south, and then through the central Pacific there, which is just about to enter right now actually, and then onwards with the intertropical convergence zone, I would assume. Looking at the Atlantic right now, you can see that tropical wave that's emerged off the coast of Africa, well to the south of the Cape Verde Islands that it passed earlier today, and that's where the 10% stems from. It will be fighting very hard with Saharan dust though. That is still a very prominent feature across the Atlantic, and it's a battle that it probably won't win. Looking at the Gulf of Mexico there, looking rather quiet except the northwestern side, the coast of the US, Texas in particular, with some thunderstorms. And that stems really from the Eastern Pacific areas of interest, and you can see some of them here. The 10% one clearly marked there right next to the number, and the 40% one to the east of that round oval there is where it's forming from, and it will move towards the northwest. The 10% on the right hand side, that hasn't yet emerged. The Western Pacific looking fairly quiet as you would expect, but thunderstorms blowing up quite a bit more actually. If you've been watching the satellite imagery in the last few days, you'll notice that the cloud coverage around the Philippines and either side of the islands has increased in the last day or two, so things are getting a little bit more unsettled, but still no clear signs of tropical development. The South Pacific also blowing up just a little bit in the last 24 hours, but not much to shout about. A few flare-ups near the Solomon Islands. And in the southern hemisphere, the Indian Ocean, the equatorial region actually, looking at this graphic, you can see those 2 disturbances quite clearly, and both of them do still have a small chance of becoming a tropical cyclone. Looking at sea surface temperatures, the Eastern Pacific remains fairly warm, at least in the tropical zone. Quite cool though in the equatorial zone, which is undergoing that La Nina. In the Atlantic, the Gulf of Mexico rather warm, and 30 degrees quite common now off the western coast of Florida and near some of the Bahamas. The Atlantic main development region still ahead of most other seasons at this point of the year. The Indian Ocean looking fairly good as well, 30 degrees creeping in now in the Bay of Bengal as well, and in the Western Pacific very much the same from what it was yesterday. Sea surface temperatures still very warm and conducive. And as you can see there, most of it is above average, except the notable exception of the Eastern Pacific and the subtropical Atlantic, and the northern Gulf of Mexico right now as well, a little bit cool. Here is Tropical Depression Boris, which to its credit isn't looking that bad in the latest frames. Another flare-up of convection in the latest frames there. This is pretty much up to date as of the production time, and you can see they're wrapping around once again, so you know, maybe there's a very small chance that it has a second very brief phase as a tropical storm. It isn't looking too bad, making a run for it, but Boris won't last for very long at all, we would expect, although models do think that it could have just a little bit of a second wind in the next 6 to 12 hours or so. So we'll keep our eye on that. Something interesting to watch as it enters the Central Pacific area That's the dividing line there, 140 degrees west, that it's about to cross. Also, you can see another little swirl actually there to the southwest as well, which we've also been watching for possible development, but no chances for that one. And there you can see the CTCX is most fond of developing it just one more time before it really dies. Wind shear is 10 to 15 knots, actually a little bit lower than what we were expecting for the next 24 hours. We were expecting 15, but it's closer to 10. Sea surface temperatures haven't degraded quite as much as we thought as well, and relative humidity about the same. So, you know, maybe there is that very short chance that we'll see for Boris. Not that it means very much. Back on June 27th, 1957, Hurricane Audrey made a landfall as a Category 4 on the US Gulf Coast. Peaked as a Category 4 at any rate, and that was the most damaging storm in terms of raw impact since 1928 and would remain so until 1965. Virginia also made landfall in the southernmost islands of Japan on this day. In 1992 also, not pictured on here, but 2 Category 4 storms existed on either side of the Pacific, one near the Philippines and one off Mexico, Celia. So the next name on the Atlantic naming list is Edward, followed by Faye. In the Eastern Pacific, we're looking for Christina and then Douglas. In the Central Pacific, Hone is next up on list 1. If Boris does reattain tropical storm intensity when it enters the Central Pacific, it will of course keep its current name. In the Western Pacific, the next name on list 3 is Sinlaku, followed by Haggard. In the North Indian Ocean, the next name on list 1 is Gatti. In the Southern Hemisphere, the Australian region's next name is Imogen, followed by Joshua. In the Southwest Indian Ocean, just 3 days now for Kundai to form before the names roll over onto a new list. And in the South Pacific, the next name in the Fiji region is Yolanda. That's all for now. We're back with another tropical weather bulletin tomorrow. Check out our new look cyclone tracker on the Force 13 website for the latest up-to-date information. You can also find us, of course, on our YouTube channel, search Force 13, and also on Facebook and Twitter, Force 13 at Force 13 on Twitter for the latest updates. You can also help the project become even better by becoming an Ultimate Fan on YouTube. To see the full list of Ultimate Fan benefits and to join, visit youtube.com/Force13/join. With a special thanks to our top supporters this month. You can also check out our growing merch store so you can show Force 13's colours wherever you go. You can also find a link to our Discord server underneath this video in the description.